morning. Good morning. It's so nice to see you all. And thank you so much, Officer Potts, for being willing to do this. We think that this is going to be a great topic of conversation. Conversations with Kim Hansen, President with the Bloomington Chamber. Please recognize that we're going to have a conversation. I'm going to ask some questions, but we're going to leave time for you all to be involved in the conversation as well. So first of all, I would like to thank Bloomington Security Solutions. They've got a little demo in the back there. Thank you so much. Can they raise your hands? Larry and Laura are here today. That seemed like a wonderful connection to make. So thank you so much for sponsoring our event today. I also want to thank CSO Lannenberg, Carter Lannenberg, probably the most important job of the whole morning. Carter went and got coffee for us. So a big round of applause for Carter. Yeah. Thank you so much. And Officer Heidi Miller is a great liaison with the Chamber. She worked very closely with Ann and myself to secure the chief as well as getting the room set up. So thank you so much to Officer Miller as well. And greeting, yes, she was greeting everybody. So it's fall, it's October, and I don't know about all of you, but so much is happening. We not only here at the Chamber have a lot going on, but how about, have you ever felt this busy? Seriously, with everything you have going on in your personal lives as well as your business life. And so thank you for making time today to come to one of our Chamber events that we launched earlier this year, the Conversations with Kim series. Really appreciate you all being here. I see a lot of familiar faces. I see some new faces, which is wonderful to have. And I want to recognize our board members that are here this morning. I know we've got Becky Kahn and Barb Gurney, as well as Chief Potts is on our board, so thank you so much. Yep. And Steve Furlong, a past board member. Yep. And then we've got a couple of elected officials, Jim Sorum and Dick Bergstrom, on our school board. Thank you so much for being here and always supporting us. So I've been here for a year. My gosh, it's gone fast. Yeah, it's gone really fast. So no more mistakes, no more thinking that I'm new, no more rookie stuff. So I'm here, and Jeff Potts has been chief of police here in Bloomington for the past, 10 years. We're coming up on November 3rd. He will be celebrating his 10th year anniversary. Wow. And so it's fun when Jeff and I have a chance to connect because we both grew up in Coon Rapids. Wow. And it's nice to have ended up here for work in the southern suburbs, growing up in the northern suburbs. And so he holds a bachelor's degree from Concordia College and a Master of Arts degree in police administration from the University of St. Thomas. You guys lost this weekend? Okay.
It's okay.
Any Johnnies in the room?
We're okay with that. The Tommies definitely played their role in making St. John's weekend pretty special. They're suffering a big loss, and
they are. That was
the Tommies certainly had a little grace this weekend and let them have a very good weekend.
So benevolent of you.
It was.
He is also a graduate of the FBI's National Academy in Quantico, Virginia. There's some good stories there. He is a 27-year veteran of the Bloomington Police Force. He began his career as a patrol officer in '91, later spent 4 years in the Special Investigations Unit, also some probably very interesting stories, where he worked undercover as a detective investigating narcotics and other vice-type criminal activity. When the Mall of America added the Bloomington Police Department satellite unit in 2002, then Sergeant Potts supervised the highly visible Mall of America retail crime unit. And his vision encouraged strong bonds between the Bloomington Police Department, mall security, store employees, and managers. And I would also add to the public, a great partnership with the public. So those efforts continue to pay off today as the Bloomington Police Department and the Mall of America security they work closely to promote a safe, enjoyable environment for shoppers and employees. And I know that something that isn't on here is that Jeff was also very, very intricately involved in the Super Bowl work. I know that you worked probably, was it over a year ahead of time?
Yep.
Yes, and if we get a chance to talk about that today, we will, because I know how, in addition to your regular duties, that was something that you took on and were a true leader amongst the other groups and the national groups that came in, and so we appreciate all the time and effort you put into that.
Yeah, the Super Bowl was definitely a team effort by the entire law enforcement kind of community in the metropolitan area. But obviously, because there were so many events happening in Bloomington here, we played a pretty key role.
And everything went so smooth.
It did.
Kudos.
We were fortunate.
Prior to being appointed to police chief, he served as commander of patrol operations, where he oversaw uniformed patrol officers, 56 of them, and 10 sergeants. So what a wealth of information. Thank you so much, Jeff, for being here with us today.
It's great to be here. Thanks for coming out on a fall morning, and it's good to see a room with actually some people in it.
You know, like I said, I've got some questions. We're going to have a conversation, and I look forward to seeing what you all have to bring to the conversation as well. So what's the biggest change that you've seen or experienced since starting your public safety career?
Oh, geez, Kim, you know, I appreciate the fact that you sent me these questions ahead of time, but frankly, I've had a hard time coming up with one, you know,
over
I'm
the sure.
27 years in this work, and so my answer isn't really there's not one thing. I mean, I think if you really sit back and think about what's changed in the world in 27 years, you can't help but think about all the technology changes that have happened. I mean, there's not too many people walk around today that don't have a phone of some kind. Most people have a smartphone, and their ability to connect to the internet is instantaneous. Social media, and of course terrorism. You know, 2001 is really not that long ago. But it is almost 20 years, you know, and so that has changed the way policing is conducted here in Bloomington with probably the largest retail center in the country. We can't ignore that whole topic, and we've had to really invest considerably in our department, in our training, in our equipment, and our abilities to respond. So, you know, I'd have to say, you know, technology, a world that includes terrorism as it does today, those are probably some of the biggest changes.
And like we hear in the national scope of things, there are probably a lot of things that you avert that we don't ever hear about or experience. Would that be true?
I think so, yeah. I mean, you know, we've had basically a full-time unit at the mall, as you mentioned, since 2002. We don't know how many things that they've averted, but what goes on behind the scenes, what the shoppers that go to the mall don't see, and what the rest of the citizens in Bloomington don't see, there's a lot of work. I mean, we have an organization of 150 people. 124 of those are sworn. The rest of them are non-sworn, but very important support staff for the department, and literally working every day to try to keep this community safe. And so, yeah, there is a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. We have a person that's connected to the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force on a full-time basis.
Oh, wow.
And that person has been, you know, not specifically related to cases here in Bloomington, but just cases in this area, has really been at the kind of the tip of the spear on terrorism investigations for the last 15 years.
Wow. And I know that, and this is something that we didn't write ahead of time, but I would be remiss to not mention that I believe my predecessor, Maureen, had reached out to your department saying that we should put together this program. And how long ago was that?
Yeah, we formed the Business Matters, Safety Matters, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago. We were doing it kind of independently. And when Maureen came in and I came in, it was about the same time. We had a conversation, and we thought it'd be good to blend our efforts. We have a really robust neighborhood watch program in Bloomington. For those who aren't residents in Bloomington, we have about 350 active neighborhood watch programs in Bloomington. We have been building that program for literally about 25 to 30 years. Nikki Pearson was a real kind of pioneer in neighborhood watch, and we thought, geez, with as many businesses in Bloomington, it would only make sense to build a business watch program. And there's really not, neighborhood watch is kind of a canned program. There's a lot of materials out there, there's a lot of marketing materials that you can go buy, and it's not, I'm not saying it's easy to build neighborhood watch, but there's a program that you can kind of subscribe to. There is not that same thing for business. So we kind of built it from scratch internally, and about 8 or 9 years ago partnered with the Chamber and have been kind of on an ongoing basis doing business watch, safety matters kind of meetings. I think we've done up to 30 of them where we've invited Chamber members in and prospective Chamber members to kind of share information that we think will help make their businesses safer. And I think it's been pretty successful. What I will say, after doing about 30 of them, we're looking for ideas. What do you guys want to hear about
That's
you know,
a great
because we've
question.
gone through this a few times, and some of them we've repeated, and we can continue to do that. But if there's topics that we haven't talked about, or maybe we need to go back and redo some of the more popular topics, we are all ears to trying to bring information to our business community that will help make the businesses safer.
Absolutely. So contact us at the Chamber, contact the Chief directly if you've got some ideas. We do those about 3 times a year, and I know many of you have attended those. I think this year we've covered cybersecurity, and that was held over at the, we brought in someone, I think, from the FBI. And yep, you remember that one? Yeah, he was. And then we had the K-9 unit speak, and you know, you think about how does that reflect the business community, and I know that he was in the Officer Blue was involved in a bank robbery.
Yep.
And thankfully it wasn't at the First Bank or U.S. Bank, but yeah, that's great. So you know, tell us what you're seeing as your top 2 to 3 issues facing our businesses and residents in terms of public safety. What, you know, you talked a little bit about you know, terrorism, but you know, from a hyper local standpoint here in Bloomington, a couple of top 2 things we're facing.
I think they're, you know, kind of on a day-to-day basis, what we see and what we respond to the most are crimes of opportunity. You know, car break-ins, some residential burglaries, commercial burglaries. You know, really they're, in many cases, these are, you know, situations that probably could be avoided. You know, people that leave belongings in their car with, in the summertime, maybe the windows are open or the doors are unlocked. Cars that are, as we come into the wintertime, we see auto theft surge a little bit, and over 50% of the cars that are stolen in this city are stolen with the keys in them, typically running.
Warming up.
If you could, I know there's a lot of remote start kind of kits out there where the keys aren't in them, but you know, one thing we tell people is if you're going to start your car, at least stay close to it, because that tends to be just you know, all too often we're responding to those kinds of things. But in general, it's crimes of opportunity where somebody who's got crime in mind sees an opportunity and they you know, it's stealing something out of a car. Recently we've had an uptick in residential burglaries. Fortunately, we haven't had one now in I think over 2 weeks. But they're cases where in some cases the garage doors are left open, things like that. Maybe front doors, in one or in a few cases we saw front doors were kicked in, and you know, we are working hard to solve those cases. But as I look in the back of the room and I see Larry sitting here, I mean, investing in decent locks for your house can sometimes be the difference between being a victim of a residential burglary and not. So I say crimes of opportunity, but those are the kinds of things that we see kind of on a day-to-day basis. Those same kinds of crimes affect businesses, just like you know, they affect people on the residential side.
And so, and I've been fairly open about this. One of the things that we've experienced in the part of town that our office is an increase in the homeless population. And I don't know, that isn't something that I wrote to you ahead of time, but it seems to dovetail into this about what we're experiencing right here in Bloomington. You know, talk about how the officers are either additionally trained or how you guys are working with this increase in this particular population.
Well, first I want to go back to kind of talking about the crime picture for the city of Bloomington, and just let people know that, you know, as I talked about, a little bit of an uptick in some of our crimes of opportunity, but over the last 5 years, we've seen almost steady, near double-digit crime decreases. So 8 to 12% on an annual basis on serious crime, which includes rape, robbery, aggravated assault, auto theft, burglary. Those crimes, kind of categorically, we've seen pretty significant drop-offs. Like I said, 40 to 50% over the last 4 or 5 years. So I just want to make sure people know that we're doing I think a pretty good job in engaging with our community to help keep it safe. We're getting a lot of help from our residential population and our businesses as we look for kind of crime prevention measures. Heidi Miller and her partner Jerry Wukowitz in our crime prevention unit are great in going out. We think that we're a better police department when we're more engaged with our community, both residential and business community. And I think that is one of the biggest changes that I've seen in 27 years, is that in 2018, the Bloomington Police Department and many others are really firmly committed to partnering with the community to keep it safe. It's really not just the work of the 150 men and women that work in this department, but it's really the 85,000 and 85,000 residents, 2,000 businesses when we're all working together, people aren't afraid to pick up the phone and give us a call and just ask questions, and I think we make it a much safer community.
I agree.
As it relates to homelessness,
well, I just want to say, I think that's why this uptick recently has caught people off guard, because there hasn't been that kind of rash of burglaries in so long.
You're right, and this is not unique to Bloomington. Our crime analyst is working with crime analysts from the entire metropolitan area, and this is a metropolitan. We think there's a couple people or a couple small groups that are out doing this in many cities. Our surrounding cities are seeing the same thing. But here's what I'll tell you about this most recent kind of uptick in burglary is when we started getting these calls, some of you might have seen, we started engaging our community in social media. Our crime prevention specialist, Katie Chase, has been sending out information. And we have gotten calls from people in the neighborhoods that we've never gotten. There's a person walking down the street is literally enough for someone to call, because when they're home during the day and they don't see this person walking down the street, to them, this is exactly what we want. An unknown person walking down the street in an area where there's been some burglaries is a reason to give us a call so we can check it out. I was talking to Larry before the meeting here, and we have been, every time we do it, we respond to a house where there's a burglary. We now not only go to that house, but we're going to go to probably 7 or 8 different houses, hoping that we can find somebody who has a security camera at the front door. That would be the one little piece of information that would help us probably crack the case, is the photo of the person or the person's doing it. And so not only are we responding to one house, we're going all around the neighborhood to see if there's one person who might have invested in a camera at the front, at the doorbell camera or something at the front door, where we've got now a photo that we can circulate again out to the community. Does anybody know this person? But circling back, engaging in the community where those crimes are occurring through Neighborhood Watch and other kind of social media, it shows that we've got a bunch of people that live in this community who really care, and they're willing to give us a call to go out and check it out, all in the effort to try and solve these crimes.
Oh, that's great. So then, yes, and we've experienced some things in our office, because the bank needs to remain, the front doors of our bank, where our office at US Bank, those front doors need to remain open because of the ATM. And we've experienced it upstairs in our office, because they've figured out how to get upstairs.
Yeah.
And I've talked to some other businesses that are experiencing some folks sleeping in their places of business because they don't have anywhere else to go, or they're not aware of the services that perhaps Veep and Hennepin County have, right behind White Castle. Can you address that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, I think we've seen both on kind of the juvenile side of the house and adults, homelessness is kind of slowly rising even out in the suburbs. To a certain degree, homelessness looks a little bit different in the suburbs, especially as it relates to juveniles. Most of the kids who would be defined as homeless in the suburbs are actually couch hopping from one friend to another, and at some point they may not have anywhere to go, and just like the adults, they'll find a place that's warm and unlocked, and that's oftentimes what you're seeing, and our officers have to go out and deal with that. And really the challenge in those particular cases is trying to connect them with the resources. Law enforcement all throughout the metropolitan area are kind of dealing with the same issue. There is a limited amount of shelter space, and so we really got to get creative. Fortunately, here in Bloomington, we've got some good partners in our hotels, and so depending on the circumstances, we can actually find them space in an unused hotel room, because we've got good relationships with the hotels, and our officers are kind of trained in how to deal with this situation. Unfortunately, many of the property owners, and when it comes to even some of our apartment buildings, not uncommon in the laundry area for those doors to be unlocked, and the property owners are not comfortable with that situation, and so they call us, and again, it's a challenge of just trying to connect those people with the right resources.
I'm glad to hear you say that, and yeah, we're gearing up for winter again, and so we'll keep an eye on it and keep in communication with you.
Yeah, and just tell people that my ask is, if you're experiencing that in your business, give us a call so that we can come out and help try and deal with it. And again, it's about connecting the people with the resources that they need.
Thank you. You've received some awards and accolades for the joint program with the St. Louis Park Police Department, Pathways to Policing. Have you guys all heard about this? It's really exciting, and I want you to tell us how how you came to this and what the results are that you're experiencing.
Sure.
Last night, I know, and this is different from the group previously, but last night 3 new officers were introduced into
Sure.
the force at the city council meeting. But talk about pathways to policing.
Okay. So Bloomington as a community and our demographics are changing. I think you don't have to look too far beyond the school district's demographics to see that our current demographics are different than they were 25 years ago. So they're changing at actually a pretty rapid pace. And the demographics of our police department have not been changing as quickly as the community. And to me, it's important to have a police department that is reflective of the community to a certain percentage. And so what we've been doing is, because our traditional hiring process and the candidates that are in the pool, there's not much diversity in that particular candidate pool for whatever reason. I mean, that's a really deep subject to try to figure that one out. And so we've had to get creative about how we hire police officers that help us at least maintain representation within the police department that's reflective of our community. And that's where the Pathway Policing program idea came from. So the Pathway to Policing program really is a program where we recruit and we look to hire people from other career fields, a broader amount of diversity. We partnered with 7 other police departments because this is not a problem or a situation unique to Bloomington. And we look for people with 2 or 4-year degrees. Most of the candidate field has 4-year degrees. And we look for them, we look to provide them with a way, because it's very challenging for them if they had an interest in law enforcement, say as a kid growing up or maybe as a young adult, that it's very tough for them to make the transition from whatever they chose, whatever they went to college for and maybe are in a career, to kind of get over into the law enforcement career, because it usually requires going back to school for about a year or 2. Our state licensing requirements are that you have a degree in law enforcement and you attend a skills class. And so what we did with the Pathway to Policing program is we look to recruit a really broad cross-section of the community at large, and then we send them off to get the required training. So this is our 2nd year. We just hired 2 cadets. They're off at Hennepin Tech and Century College, are kind of partnering to provide them with the educational requirements. And I want to stress that there are some criticisms of the Pathway to Policing program, and it's that we're fast-tracking people, or we're not giving them the appropriate amount of educational kind of foundation to be successful in a law enforcement career. And I can tell you that I personally have worked very closely with Hennepin Tech and Century College to make sure that what these cadets are going to receive is equal to, if not greater than, the people who are trying to get jobs in law enforcement through the traditional pathway. Mm-hmm. And so there was a case in Minneapolis not too long ago, a very tragic case that kind of highlighted potentially some issues with what's called fast tracking. The program that we put together is not fast tracking in terms of the number of hours and classroom hours and requirements. It's no different than any of our traditional police officers and what they've attended. And what we benefit from these folks is number one, it provides us with a broader kind of cross-section of our community, higher amounts of diversity, but they come to us with life experience in some other career field. Mm-hmm. And we think that's a value add to our police department.
Thank you. That's great. If anybody's got more questions about that, definitely feel free to ask. Top tips that you can share with business owners and employees that you have here today about keeping themselves safe, whether it's cybersecurity, physical safety issues, terrorism, break-ins. What are some things that you can share with our audience about that they can do personally? Yeah.
I think that businesses just like our police department, everybody's got to evolve, right? I mean, what we're doing today in 2018 is a lot different than what we did 27 years ago when I got into law enforcement. And so keeping pace with that is really tough. Cybersecurity is a major issue right now. I mean, I think we talked about this at the beginning. You're paying bills on an app. Well,
Yep.
That's very convenient, and it's it avoids the stamp and the kind of the vulnerabilities of mailing in a check. It doesn't come without some security risks itself. So I can tell you that one of the major changes is the advancements in cybersecurity. There are resources out there. Data breaches, you don't have to go more than a few days, whether it's a governmental agency or a private corporation or a local business that has had a data breach. So doing whatever you can to protect your data is critically important. And again, there's resources out there. If you need any specifically, come talk to me afterwards. I can kind of point you in the direction of where you might be able to get some help with maybe an audit of your cybersecurity practices, and so I think that's one major area. Physical security of your business and your property is also, again, trying to take away the crime of opportunity. Larry nicely kind of pointed me to a brochure that's in the back of the room. If you pick this up and kind of page through it, I think this would do a heck of a lot better job than I could of giving you some tips on how to keep your business safe.
Oh,
but that's
cool.
really important.
Bringing that.
Partnership between Medico and the National Crime Prevention Council. There's a lot of good tips in there. The last thing I'll kind of hit on is developing emergency plans for your business is very important. Again, you don't have to go too many days between news stories of an employee at a business who came in and may be or may not be suffering from mental illness or some other kind of factors, and all of a sudden there's a tragedy in the workplace. There's things that you can do to help prevent that. The development of an emergency plan, which we can help you with. Heidi and Jerry from our crime prevention office have gone out and done. Also Andy Risdahl, our Homeland Security Coordinator, can help develop those. There's resources, that's also covered in the pamphlet. Not only the development of the plan within the business of what to do and maybe how to prevent that kind of thing from happening, but it's probably one of the most important pieces is, are you developing a messaging plan that if it happens, how are you going to message it? The incident is one thing, and there could be tragedy and all kinds of devastation that goes with the incident, but what can really affect negatively, even more so affect the business is how are you messaging it, and what's your communication plan post-event? So if you develop an emergency plan, don't forget about that part, because it can be just as important as the first part of the plan.
That's a great point. So I'm just going to ask you one more question and then open it up. If you have time to watch television, which I'm not sure if you have a lot of time, do you watch crime drama TV?
No.
Would you be just too critical?
I find it to be, frankly, it's just, it's not realistic enough. I think they make it look like, you can solve every crime in 48 hours or less, or 24 hours or less. And
within an hour.
Within and I don't even think it's a full hour, Jim. It's about 48 minutes of the hour, because you got to factor in commercials. But no, I don't watch a whole lot of crime TV. If you're on and know what I do watch, it's primarily I'm a sports fan. Minnesota teams primarily. Minnesota Vikings, Minnesota Wild, Twins, probably my favorites. So yeah, I don't watch a lot of TV, but I will tune in to a game if there's one on at night.
Oh, that's great. World Series predictions?
I don't know. I hate to say this, but I hope the Brewers actually get into it. And I know I actually have a cabin in Wisconsin, so I'm kind of a part-time Packer and Brewer fan on the weekends usually only. But hey, they're kind of the underdog, kind of a small market team like the Twins, so I'm all about. Let's see if the Brewers can't take one home.
That's fun. That's fun. All right, questions from the audience for Chief Potts.
I have a question. So I'm Laura with Bloomington Security Solutions, and I have read about programs around the country where businesses that have video systems partner with the police to provide surveillance footage in the event of an incident. Do you guys have something like that, or would you consider it?
So we have started kind of looking into, I'll call it kind of a project with a company who can do that. So we work closely with Mall of America and the school districts. We have the ability to do it with those folks already. But as you mentioned, there's a lot of other security cameras in our community, and so there are companies out there that can help you get real-time access to that in the case of an incident or even just surveillance. So yes, we're working with it. There was a vendor that provided a service during the Super Bowl, and they are also kind of out in the community here now after the Super Bowl, working with communities to try and tie together all the security systems. Got to be a little bit careful about accessing data as a government agency, and there are folks in our community in Minnesota that it makes them very nervous when even police, as an arm of the government, have access to surveillance cameras. So we have to make sure that we walk a kind of a balancing act there of what data we have access to. But certainly during an incident or when something happens and we can go back and get that data, there are products out there that are available, and we're actually looking at one very closely. It's kind of a cost issue at this point, but we think we can get over that and kind of at least gain the ability to go get their access data after an event. As for accessing it in real time, that's a little bit more of a challenge.
Right.
But yes, we are working with one company to try and pull that off.
I have a question. I was on the city website the other day, and as I go through some of the different departments, mainly because of the I-35 bridge thing, you know, I wanted to find out more about that. I went into the police department, and then about 3-4 levels down, just because I'm a curious sort of guy, I found the arrest records. And so in it, there was a weekly arrest records. And so naturally, I had to go see if my name was.
Or your doppelganger.
Yeah, or anybody else around here was in it, you know, so I could give them a call. But it was just amazing the number of in a week calls that the police have to go to. Domestic abuse and drugs probably were, you know, some burglaries were the most common. But after going through that, scrolling through it, I said, and they listed all the different weeks. I said, I got to get out of here. This is depressing to see all of this going on, and yet the police are always on call to go to any incident that happens.
Yeah, the amount of, you know, police calls that we deal with in a given year is probably in the neighborhood of 60,000. Now, not all of those are reports of crime. They're suspicious activity. They're calls where our officers have to go out and just check something out. But yeah, I hate to, you know, I don't want that to sound, Jim, like we've got a real, you know, kind of a dangerous community. We share that information because that's just kind of what a transparent organization does, and many other agencies are doing that. But yeah, you're right. The amount of kind of in variety of incidents that our officers have to deal with, it is pretty, and that's another thing that's changed quite a bit. Here's a fact that might shock some people. So a project that we've been working on for a couple of years is trying to develop a real robust crisis intervention kind of program. You might have heard in the news that the training standard is slowly becoming having all your officers trained in CIT, which is a 40-hour course where they go out, and if they're dealing with someone in crisis, they can kind of do a on-the-spot diagnosis and then apply de-escalation tactics that typically work with that. Now, that's a little risky, trying to teach police officers to kind of be junior psychologists, but there are some things that you can do from a training standpoint that, because there are some things that are pretty obvious if you know what you're looking for. But on an annual basis, 5 years ago, we were responding to about 800 calls a year involving people who are in crisis. And that can mean a lot of different things. It could be all the way up to where someone's suicidal. It could be a young child that's out of control because of autism. It can be anything in between. And this last year, 2017, we're over 1,400. So we're increasing at a rate of about 25% per year and calls for people in crisis. And so that just lends some credence to the idea that we need to train our officers on how to deal with those calls. But that might not even be enough. Right now we're in the process of trying to figure out if we can develop a program here in Bloomington where we can take those 1,400 calls and do some serious analytics on them. And if we have the ability to have a caseworker in the police department really work intensively on those calls that we're going to the most frequently visited calls, and really make sure that those people are connected with the services. There's a lot of services, mental health services in Hennepin County, and sometimes it's a breakdown between the law enforcement agency and Hennepin County. And if we can have someone kind of fill that gap as a caseworker, you might be able to connect those people with the services that they need in a much quicker way, but also reduce the number of calls that we're going to on an annual basis. But when I looked at the data, 1,400 crisis calls per year, that's a huge change from 15 or 20 years ago.
And I should mention that there are a lot of people from out of town that come here to Bloomington to do their crimes.
Bloomington is a very unique community. You guys know this, but we have a population base of somewhere in the 85,000 range, right? We have a Mall of America that attracts over 40 million. We have 45 hotels that on any given night probably bring another 10,000 plus people to the city of Bloomington. And so our police officers are out having to deal with that. Now, normally if a population is, you know, on an annual basis, that 42 million at the mall, on a daily basis, that's between 1 and 200,000, on top of the 85,000, on top of the 12,000 in the hotel. So we're policing that with 123 officers. We're running pretty lean, but our officers do a really good job of keeping up with it.
Yeah,
And
they
that's,
do.
but that's also why we need the help from our community, right? Our residential community, our business community. We have a very tight relationship with our hotels. Every year it seems like we're adding 1, 2, 3 hotels. I keep wondering, are we ever going to hit the ceiling for hotel rooms in Bloomington? But every year there's another 1 or 2. I think right now we've got 4 under construction.
Yes.
But our officers are constantly checking in. We call it a directed patrol, where they go into the hotels, talk to the desk, the people working the front desk, to find out if there's anything in the hotel that we should know about. And our partnership with the Mall of America has always been very good. We have officers that are working there full time to do some kind of really amazing things in terms of retail crime. There's probably no retail crime scheme in the country that we haven't seen at the Mall of America over the last 25 years.
I bet. Good question, Jim. I think Luann, you had your hand up.
Curious, and maybe this is for Bloomington Security, but what seems to be the best home camera that you are seeing people use that would be helpful to you? Because I'm in the process of looking at home cameras, and I have some Nest cameras that bug out all the time. So I'm wondering what you find the best brand or the best possible solution would be to help you.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a few things that might kind of go into what makes it the best. And Larry and Laura, is it from, they could probably give you the specifics and better information. I think their focus is primarily commercial. If you're looking at residential, here's my experience. So there's a lot of pretty inexpensive cameras that you can buy that are wireless, that you can connect to your phone. And if it's just a matter of wanting a security camera to kind of keep an eye on your place, I encourage you to go look at some of the kind of the big box vendors around town. I picked up a system at Sam's Club that I have installed in my cabin. It's a brand Arlo, 3 cameras, 7 days of cloud storage for that video. It'll send me an alert on my phone if there's an activation, a door gets opened or something like that, and it was under $250. The quality of the video isn't like the best in the market, but what I was kind of going for is I just want something to be able to kind of keep an eye on my place when I'm not there, and if there's motion detected inside the camera or inside the cabin, I want to know about it. And I'll tell you, that right there would have been, if someone who had been the victim, I think I mentioned this earlier, one of these burglaries, if just having one of those cameras in place in their house, and they're not really obvious that that there's a camera in the house. They're very small. You can set them on a shelf. You can screw them into the wall. But boy, that video would have been critical to us, identifying whoever was doing that. So the folks from Bloomington Security can probably give you better information on who's the best. But for me, it was kind of a combination of cost and just having the ability to keep an eye on my place. And I know there's other vendors out there that you can go to Best Buy and Sam's Club and in Costco and find all, there's a big section on them. But for me, it was about just trying to have something that was relatively inexpensive. I don't have to pay a monthly monitoring fee or anything like that. So.
That's great. Where in Wisconsin is your cabin?
Near Balsam Lake, on Balsam Lake.
Okay, and when is the party?
Ah.
We're going to watch
First
a
of
little
all,
baseball? Yeah?
As you might be able to imagine with my chosen career path, the cabin's not real big. It is a cabin, but it usually fits about the 3 or 4 of us in my family, and that's about it.
Okay. So, yeah, Arnie.
Just a chance to let you know that the block watch activity is really neat. I presented at the last block watch event you had for people, and a lot of very interested and interesting people that show up for that. That's just an excellent resource, I think, for the community. The other thing I think that's really important is what Heidi does.
Oh, in fact, she just walked in.
Yeah. Congratulations. It's good.
Come on up.
Come on up here, Heidi. We want to come here, Heidi. Come here for just a second. We gotta talk about Heidi for a minute.
Yes, we do. Hello.
So, Heidi Miller.
So what I wanted to say is that even though I live in Edina, I can walk about 400 feet and I'm in Bloomington. And so when Heidi sends out a note that says we've got a rash of these auto thefts, auto burglaries, in the area, and I quickly, got on the email to our property manager, our condominium in Edina, right on the border. We had 392 units they could get information out, because we're in proximity. The first answer I got was, well, that's Bloomington. We're not in Bloomington. Well, some of those were, I think, on Minnesota Drive.
Oh, yeah.
That area,
Yeah.
and that's right near our place. So, does the department have any way to get to these property management companies, because they can, they do an email to 392 units. It's really quickly, and there must be other condominium property management.
Yeah, I think the short answer is, and Heidi can probably do a better job, but we are connected pretty well to the property owners. And when we send out crime alerts, I'm sure they're in. Now, I don't know about the property owners in adjacent cities. Certainly something to think about, especially when it comes to crimes at the borders.
Yeah.
But I know that they do have a pretty tight relationship with our property owners here in Bloomington. But that's a good suggestion. There's another way to solve that problem, though, Arnie. There's a lot of nice homes in Bloomington available. Come on over. And then you'll be in, we'll make sure you're in that network that we communicate on a real regular basis.
Pleasure living in Bloomington on 106 in Washburn for 7 years back in the late 60s, early 70s. It's a great place to live.
It's a long time ago.
Hold on, Heidi, real quick. So Heidi Miller is probably somebody that all of you guys have seen for many years. She was really the person who helped create the Business Matters, Safety Matters program when we kind of conceived the idea. Heidi had already been working with, as I mentioned, our Business Watch program and really kind of ran with it. Heidi's been very involved in kind of the neighborhood watch and crime prevention scene throughout Bloomington. It was our 2018 Optimist Club Police Officer of the Year recipient, award recipient. Yeah. Heidi and I go back a long time. We went to Skills together, so we started our careers here in Bloomington at the same time. And I think she's definitely made her mark kind of in the crime prevention world. Over 20 years.
Close to 15.
15 years? I'm including some investigative time, I think, in that. So, but Heidi in January is going to go back to the patrol division. And so Heidi's, I told a few people inside the organization this, but I don't even want to admit this because I think we're roughly the same age, but Heidi's kind of approaching the last few years of her career, and she sees some benefits.
High five.
She sees some benefits of going back to the patrol division, but she's done great work in her role in the crime prevention unit, investigations before that, and I just want to kind of publicly say thank you for all the hard work. You've done a great job for the community.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got, I think, a few more months to work closely with you. More questions? How are we doing at time? Oh, we're good. Yes, John.
Does the department ever suggest that certain businesses maybe be closed, or you've got some calls, some businesses that outside the mall, of course, because of its size, but there are some businesses that just always seem to attract a little bit more of certain types of problems. At least that's what's being reported. Do you ever get to the point where you tell the city, you got to do something about this?
Well, there hasn't been very many cases where we've actually gone out and suggested that they close. Instead, what we'll try to do is work with them to try to, through crime prevention, Heidi and her partner will go out and try and look at what's really going on and see if we can't prevent as many of those as possible. Maybe work with them to change some of their kind of operating practices to prevent it. In some cases, the businesses are receptive to that advice, and they really do work hard to kind of change the environment or change some of their practices to have a situation where there's not as many. But it's tough. It's really hard for the police department to go in and close a business down for really kind of poor business practices. Instead, we rather try and work with them. We rather try to kind of come up with solutions that will change that. In my 27-year history, there's really only a handful of businesses where it's really a problem, where we just haven't been able to kind of solve the problem. But no, it's tough to go in there and close them. We do have an ordinance in town called the Problem Property Ordinance, where certain kinds of calls for service, we'll call them kind of nuisance calls, that there is an obligation on the property owner's part to try and solve those, because if they are the recipient of an unusually high amount of city services, we can assess a fine or fee to the business, and we've done that. And then oftentimes that's the motivation that is needed to kind of change the the environment or change the practices to solve the problem. But there really haven't been that many that we think are so problematic that we think they should close.
Yeah. Dick and then Becky.
Sure. Well, first of all, Kim, you might want to check, see if your bill was paid. I think I got a text from Just saying. You touched on it earlier, the relationship that the police department has with the school district. Could you elaborate a little bit more for the folks that aren't familiar with how we do partner and how we work together?
Sure. So the police department and the school district have been great partners for a long time. I mean, we obviously have a vested interest in school safety and protection of the students in the school in our schools. And so for, I don't know how it's been, more than 20 years we've had school resources assigned to the school district. We have a full-time officer in each high school, and we have 2 other officers basically on a full-time basis that are partnering with all the other schools, working on the criminal cases that occur within those, but also just working with the school staff to try to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep those safe. And probably another area that I think maybe do a little more than a lot of cities is we work very closely with Rick Kaufman and trying to help advise on how to keep the schools safe, right? And school safety programs. Unfortunately, in our country, there's been way too many events where just very, very tragic situations have happened in our schools, and we pray that those events never come to Bloomington in any fashion. But we're always trying to be ready. This past year, we took our school safety program, kind of focused on an active shooter scenario, and we met with all the kind of upper administration from the schools in Bloomington, and we involved them as role players, actually in the role that they would play in an incident like that. And so we just did 4 separate training events where we rotated it from a few different schools. Our staff, we created a scenario where our staff would respond. We included school district staff for the first time ever and having them really carry out kind of their role during that training. And you know, I hate to say this, you know, I don't want to sound like we're kind of encouraging something to happen there, but I think we're as ready as anybody can be for one of these incidents to happen. The school district has done a great job, and I think we helped kind of partner with them a little bit on some physical safety measures to help keep our schools safer. If you've seen the schools, they now have kind of vestibules, kind of protected entrances to the schools. Bloomington School District is trying to stay out in front as they are compared to many of the other school districts in the state of Minnesota, and credit to the school district for all the work they're done. But we're fortunate to have a really good relationship with the school district in the efforts to try and keep our schools safe.
And then to follow up with it, all emergency type agencies were involved, including the fire department, EMT, and the police. Everybody was on like a real event, and it was the reports that we got back from some of the people were, wow, we're really ready, or wow, I hope it doesn't come to this, you know, including a school bus and everything else like that. So it was really a live project activity.
We actually put role players in place that had makeup on to make them look like they were wounded or injured, and some of the people that participated, I think, thought, wow, this is really realistic. And but what we're trying to do is really create, in a training environment, something as close to it as you can get. And you really never can totally recreate the level of chaos that you're going to really see in an incident, but we try to do the best we can to make sure that we put people in a position to kind of just get a taste of what an incident like that would feel like, so that we know, you know, the old adage is you do what you train. So when something happens, we wanted them to have something to revert to and kind of follow the protocol as they were trained. And yeah, we were lucky to have a great partnership with the school district to do those exercises. So thanks to you guys.
Yeah, I know Rick Kaufman came and spoke to Rotary recently and talked about the preparedness and the work that he's been doing. So
we had one more program that I just want to
Yeah.
highlight with the school now that we're talking about the school district. And you know, there's another kind of you know, bad kind of epidemic kind of plaguing our society today, and that's this opioid epidemic. And you know, Bloomington's not you know, immune to that. We've had overdoses here in Bloomington. Our officers do carry Narcan, and they've had Narcan saves at the scenes of some of these overdoses. And so a lot of the law enforcement community has been focused on what happens at the scene of an overdose, right? What are we prepared to do to try to save the life of the person who's overdosed, and focused a lot, like I said, on Narcan. But there's also kind of an educational component here in Bloomington that I think we're one of only a couple cities in the state. We've gone out. Last year was the first year that we had police detectives, along with help from the FBI, do an educational program for every 5th grader in Bloomington on trying to prevent people from getting involved in opioid abuse. It's called Chasing the Dragon. It's a documentary that was produced by the FBI, and the program really is viewing a documentary and then having a panel discussion with the students, and really trying to have this panel discussion really kind of plant the seed in their mind that this is stuff that is so dangerous. One experimental use can be deadly. And unfortunately, because there's not a lot of options in this field, it's kind of a scared straight type of an approach, but really this Chasing the Dragon is the only educational program out there that exists in the country that we're aware of. And there's only a handful of cities in the country that are going out and making sure that every student in the school district has an opportunity to go through that program. And kind of on a last-minute request to the school district, when we asked, can we come into your schools and teach this? After all the curriculum had been set, teachers were, I don't think the teachers were real thrilled with this, and we wanted to hijack 2 days, but they did it because this topic is so important. And last year we did it. We plan on doing it again this year. And again, it's just another effort to try to get out with a police officer and these students and trying to do whatever we can to help keep them safe.
Thank you. I'm glad you had a chance to talk about that.
Becky, you had a question?
Yeah, so I get to work in the manufacturing industry, which is historically male-oriented or male-dominated. I tend to perceive that the police force is that as well. Do you have advice for women who want to either rise in the ranks of the police department, or those who are interested in entering policing?
Well, there was a great example. Heidi Miller joined us 27 years ago. We're constantly looking for diversity in our police department, and I have had some success just going out and talking to people in the community. Last night, the reason I could say this is set up just for our presentation here today, but last night we swore in 3 new police officers, and so that's why the backdrop is up for some photos, and it fit nicely for today. But going out and I think being intentional about trying to bring in diversity to the police department, including gender diversity. But the story I'll tell you is more about kind of ethnic diversity. So, but the same kind of theory applies, in that our officers are out talking to people every day. So some of you may know I belong to the Bloomington Rotary Club. And it's a program, part of the Bloomington Rotary Club is the Strive program. It's a program in our schools, primarily the Bloomington Noon Rotary Club focuses on Kennedy High School. And they deliver a program to students that are usually in the lower 50 percentile from a GPA standpoint in the school. And they come in probably 25 to 30 weeks out of the year and do a program before school starts, or right as school starts. It's kind of like life lessons taught by Rotarians. How to prepare for a job interview, kind of ethics and in post-high school life, right? And trying to teach them just some lessons that might be beneficial to them. And so, as I was participating in the Strive program, part of the program is to have a luncheon where we invite the Strive students to the Rotary Club for a lunch. And so one day we had probably 75 students come to the Rotary Club, and they sit at tables kind of by vocation. So if I'm interested in this type of career field, we'll try and connect them with Rotarians. So I sat at a table with a group of Kennedy kids, some of which were interested in law enforcement, some of them were not. But this is the same type of kind of outreach that we're doing with women. At this table was a young man who told me, I'm interested in being a pilot. His name was Jamal Page. African-American student at Kennedy, 17 years old. And I said, well, Jamal, we'll try and find you a pilot. We don't have a pilot in the club, but if I can find one, I will connect you with the pilot to help you and do whatever he or she can to get you involved in law enforcement. So Jamal says, okay, thanks. And I talked to the rest of the kids at the table. The meeting ends. Kids go back to school. The next day, I get a phone call from Jamal Page, and he says, hey, I got to write a paper for one of my classes, and I'm supposed to talk to somebody who works for the city. Would you have a few minutes for me I got to get this project done, right? It's like typical high school student. It's like due tomorrow, and I'm going to start working on it today. So Jamal and I spoke for half an hour. I assume he wrote the paper and turned it in. I gave him a little tour of the police department afterwards, and then This was the fourth or the last semester of his senior year. He graduated about a month later, and he called me and says, you know what, Chief, I've changed my mind. I'm no longer interested in being a pilot. I want to be a police officer. And I said, Jamal, you get yourself a job, or get yourself enrolled at Normandale or somewhere in a law enforcement program, and we'll hire you as a community service officer. So Jamal is getting after it, right? He enlisted in summer classes just because he knew that that was the trigger to try and get this community service officer job. So we hired Jamal Page as a CSO 3 years ago. Last night, one of the 3 officers that we swore in as a police officer was Jamal Page. And but that's the kind of thing in terms of how we diversify our department from a gender standpoint, from an ethnicity standpoint. That's the way we're doing it. We think we've got great people right here in Bloomington and our Bloomington schools. We've got Normandale Community College. We've got a great base of residents and businesses that can be, kind of an untapped market for us to recruit into law enforcement. And so those are the kinds of things we're doing to try to diversify the police department.
And I'll follow up the Bloomington Chamber. We have a lot of emphasis on workforce development. And so we're creating a mentorship and internship resource center within the chamber. And I went into the schools. I was actually at Jefferson. And then several days later, a young female student contacted me about a career in law enforcement. I think she was particularly looking into criminal profiling. So I connected her with you and Emily, your assistant. And then I also connected her with the mall security because I think they do a great job and are always on the lookout for criminal activity. So, I think that the more we have exposure to you, and thank you so much for making yourself so accessible to the students.
So one other area, we have an Explorer post here in Bloomington that is, Explorers are typically high school students with an interest in law enforcement. It's kind of like a Boy Scout program, but it's open to males and females. We make sure that we always have female advisors because they're out and they're participating in the recruitment. The Explorer program is a great way for young people to kind of get an idea of what law enforcement is all about. They train all year long, and then they go off to competitions and compete against other law enforcement department Explorer posts. And we make sure that we have female advisors because they're out in the schools and they're doing the recruitment. And if we can get just a conversation with someone, oftentimes at a very young age, can change the trajectory of their whole kind of life with one, like that conversation. There's nothing special about me with Jamal Page. The point is that we encourage people just to have that one-on-one conversation with someone when they're in that phase of life where they're really trying to figure it out, and you never really know what the impact of that conversation is going to be. In this case, it was great. I mean, it was so rewarding for me to hear when Jamal Page called me and said, you know what, I really changed my mind. I don't really want to be a pilot. I want to be a police officer. I mean, that's exactly what we're trying to do with those one-on-one conversations.
Oh, it must be time. All right, we got one more question from Barb.
I've always known that your job is very, very dangerous, and it seems like the media lately has maybe negatively shown how seriously dangerous your job is. Do you feel like that's giving you a hard time recruiting? And I compliment you for all the, outside of the box thinking you've done in terms of hiring more staff. But do you think long term that it's going to be hard to find police officers?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think in general there might be, and one way we kind of gauge that is we're seeing some kind of slight reductions in the number of people entering into the programs, the educational programs at the colleges and universities that have law enforcement programs. We're fortunate here in Bloomington in that there are a lot of police officers who work in other cities who view Bloomington as that's the place I want to get to. And so we're a little bit unique in that when we're hiring, whether it be through a pathway program or promotion of CSOs to police officers like we did last night, or a more traditional hiring program, that we tend to see more applicants than a lot of other cities because honestly, I think Bloomington is kind of a destination place to work. There's a lot of opportunities in this department that other departments don't have, mainly because of our size. It's, I think, viewed to be a pretty stable place to work, the city of Bloomington, I mean. And so I'm optimistic about our future here. I do have a little bit of concern about the career of law enforcement. But I think there's a good chance it's going to rebound. I think that you're starting to see media reports that really do kind of show the real side of what law enforcement is. And there's a lot of people growing up that they do want to, they want to have a meaningful career. They want to get into a career field where they can kind of feel like they make a difference in their community. And I think in the end that kind of a significant factor in people deciding what they want to do. You know, is it kind of a scary career field? Is there incidents each year that make you kind of go, geez, why would you ever want to do that? There are, but fortunately, there's still relatively small number of those that actually happen. They get a lot of media attention when they do, but from a percentage standpoint, it's relatively low. And we provide some really good training for officers to try to deal with those situations and hopefully be successful. So, you know, I'm optimistic about it, not only here in Bloomington, but as a career. I think that you're starting to see kind of the tide shift again to be more kind of positive about the work of law enforcement, because they really are pretty important to the kind of fabric of a community.
Absolutely, and I know that you're very humble in your leadership. I want to say thank you for going into law enforcement, because I do think that your leadership, your vision, your demeanor has a lot to do with why Bloomington is a destination for some of these other officers. So I'm going to say that. I'm going to say thank you.
I wish I could take credit for that, but I'll tell you, when I got into law enforcement, Heidi was with me in 1991. We were fortunate to get to come work here, because even then, Heidi grew up here, so she knew. I actually grew up, as you said, in Coon Rapids, and I was a community service officer at the Coon Rapids Police Department, and my dad was a police officer in Coon Rapids. Now this tells you how my career path was probably headed. Like, I grew up with a dad who worked in the city that I lived in, so I was the cop's kid in the city that he worked, and that wasn't always fun, but I was always very proud of my father and the work that he did, and I'm sure it's the inspiration for why I got into law enforcement. But even then, and as strong as my desire to be a Coon Rapids police officer was in 1991, when I got an opportunity to come work here, one of my dad's old partners said to me, he pulled me aside, he says, "Hey Jeff, I just got to tell you, okay, I know you probably want to work here in Coon Rapids, but if you have an opportunity to work in Bloomington, you'd be a fool to pass that up."
Oh, wow. That's
and this
cool.
was a guy that I looked up to as a kid, right? He worked with my dad, and I was shocked to hear him basically encourage me. And I left Coon Rapids, I came here, and it was the best decision I ever made. And my role and Heidi's role while we're here is just to be the caretakers of this organization. And you know, as we see the world change, and the hardest thing in any career, in any kind of job you do, is to try to keep pace with it, right? Encourage your organization to change. And there's two things cops hate the most: change, and the way things are. And so, but our job is to keep this organization moving forward and do whatever we can so that whoever comes in next gets to be in the same fortunate position that I was and that Heidi was 20 some odd years ago.
Thank you. I feel safer just being here today. Thank you so much. And so if you enjoy this conversation, our next conversation with Kim is going to be a cocktail hour again, and we're going to talk about giving, the philanthropy landscape here in the Bloomington area. So we'll have more than likely some of our nonprofits, and we'll be talking about giving opportunities. So look for that information on November 27th, and that is right prior to our Keystone Luncheon. If some of you are familiar with the Keystone program, I don't know if this announcement's gone out, but I'm going to let you all know that Walzer Automotive is a recipient of one of our Keystone Awards, and that's because Walzer chooses to give away a percentage of their earnings to the philanthropic community every year. 5%, that's huge. Think about that. So they're being awarded, and I'm excited to have this conversation about giving opportunities prior to the holidays. You guys, thank you. Great questions. Wonderful
Thanks.
conversation.
It's great to be here.
This is, I learned a lot.